The year was 2847, and humanity had spread across the stars like seeds carried by the wind. They had built cities on 17 different worlds. They had made friends with alien races from distant galaxies. They had achieved peace and prosperity that their ancestors could only dream about. But all of that ended when they came. They were not like the other aliens humanity had met. They were tall creatures with hard shells covering their bodies like armor. They had 4 arms and eyes that never blinked. They did not come to trade or talk. They came to conquer. They wanted Earth because Earth was the heart of humanity. They believed that if they crushed the heart, then the body would die forever. Their warships appeared without warning in the skies of every human world at the same time. The attacks were brutal and fast. Colony after colony fell to the armies. Billions of humans died in the first week alone. The screams of the dying echoed across the stars, but there was no one left to hear them. Admiral Cole was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes, but he refused to surrender. He commanded what remained of the human fleet and fought with everything he had. General Marsh stood beside him on the ground, leading soldiers through burning cities and ruined streets. Together, they held Earth longer than anyone thought possible. But they kept coming. For every ship the humans destroyed, 10 more took its place. For every soldier that fell, 100 more landed on the beaches and in the fields. The war was not a battle between equals. It was a slaughter. 3 months after the invasion began, Admiral Cole died when his flagship was torn apart by weapons. General Marsh fell 2 weeks later defending a refugee camp full of children. One by one, the leaders of humanity were killed. One by one, the cities went dark. One by one, hope faded from the hearts of those who remained. Danny was a young man of 23 years when the world ended around him. He had joined the military because he wanted to protect people. He had trained hard and fought harder. He had watched his friends die in the streets of Chicago as alien soldiers burned everything they touched. He had carried wounded civilians through smoke and fire while plasma bolts streaked past his head. He had done everything a soldier could do, and it was not enough. On the final day, Danny found himself alone in the ruins of an old military bunker. His squad was dead. His commanding officer was dead. Everyone he had ever known was dead. The radio had gone silent hours ago, and he knew what that meant. He was the last one. He checked his rifle and found only a few shots remaining. His body was covered in cuts and burns. He had not slept in 3 days and had not eaten in 2. But Danny was still standing, and that meant the fight was not over. They found him at sunset. 1,000 warriors surrounded the bunker with weapons raised and victory in their eyes. Their high commander stood at the front watching the last human with cold amusement. He had conquered 17 worlds and killed billions of humans. This one boy meant nothing to him. Danny stepped out of the bunker and raised his rifle. His hands did not shake. His voice did not waver. He looked at the army before him and smiled the smile of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You want this planet," he said. "Come and take it." They opened fire. Danny shot back, killing 3 of them before the plasma bolts tore through his body. He fell to the ground and his blood soaked into the earth of the world he had tried so hard to protect. The last human soldier was dead. Walked over to the body and looked down at it. He felt nothing but contempt for the creature at his feet. Humans were weak and soft. They had been easy to kill, and soon they would be forgotten entirely. He turned away and gave orders for his troops to begin the final phase of occupation. He did not know that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, there was a facility that did not appear on any map. It had been built 800 years ago by people who understood that humanity might one day face extinction. They had prepared for the worst and hoped they would never be proven right. Inside that facility, a computer system called Minerva monitored the world above. It was connected to sensors that tracked the vital signs of every human on Earth. For 8 centuries, it had watched and waited as humanity grew and thrived. Now it watched as the last heartbeat stopped. A countdown that had been frozen for hundreds of years finally reached zero. Emergency lights flickered on in rooms that had been dark since before they existed. Machines hummed to life. Power flowed through cables that had waited patiently for this moment. In a vast chamber filled with rows of metal pods, something began to happen. Frost that had built up over centuries started to melt. Needles from sleeping bodies. Hearts that had been still for 800 years began to beat again. The first eyes to open belonged to Captain Grant. He had been 34 years old when he volunteered for the Titan program. He had been a Special Forces soldier who had seen too much death and wanted to make sure no one else would have to. They had changed his body in ways that made him more than human. They had trained him to fight enemies that had not yet been born. Then they had put him to sleep and told him he would wake when he was needed most. Sat up slowly and pulled the tubes from his arms. The air was cold and stale. The lights were dim and red. Around him, he could hear other pods opening and other soldiers waking from their long sleep. He did not know what year it was. He did not know what had happened while he slept. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. If the protocol had been activated, then something terrible had happened to his people. And whoever was responsible was going to pay. When the last human fell, Earth's sleeping super soldiers awoke. Part 2: The Protocol. Grant stood in the center of the chamber and watched as 46 pods opened around him. Men and women he had trained with centuries ago were waking up. Their eyes were confused at first, but then the confusion turned to focus. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were Titans. Dr. Vance had created the Titan program in 2040, one during a time when humanity was tearing itself apart over water and oil and land. She was a brilliant scientist who saw both the best and worst of her species. She believed that someday humanity would face a threat from beyond the stars. She wanted to make sure they would be ready. The volunteers for the program had changes that pushed the limits of what medicine and technology could do. Their bones were reinforced with metal alloys that made them nearly unbreakable. Their muscles were enhanced with synthetic fibers that gave them the strength of 10 men. Their eyes could see in the dark, and their ears could hear whispers from 100 meters away. Their brains had been modified to process information faster than any computer. But the changes came at a cost. The Titans were too powerful to exist in peacetime. Governments feared them. Citizens distrusted them. So Dr. Vance made a choice. She put them to sleep in a hidden facility and programmed the computer to wake them only when all hope was lost. Lieutenant Kate was the second to fully wake. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and steady hands. Before the Titan program, she had been a sniper who could hit targets that others could not even see. The modifications had made her even better. She could now shoot the wings off a fly from 2 kilometers away. She walked over to and nodded. "Captain, I assume something bad happened." "The protocol activated," replied. "That means humanity fell." Sergeant was next. He was a big man with a loud laugh and a love for explosions. He had been a demolitions expert before volunteering, and the modifications had given him an instinct for destruction that bordered on artistic. He looked around the chamber and let out a low whistle. 800 years, he said, reading a display on the wall. "That is a long nap." Dr. Christina Mercer joined them moments later. She was the team medic and the only Titan with a background in alien biology. She had studied every species humanity had ever encountered, and many they had only theorized about. Her mind was perhaps the most valuable weapon they possessed. One by one, the other Titans gathered in the center of the room. There were 46 of them in total, soldiers and scientists and specialists of every kind. They had been chosen because they were the best humanity had to offer. They had been modified to become something more. Notice that one pod remained sealed. Inside, he could see the shape of a man floating in the blue liquid that had kept them alive for so long. He walked over and looked at the name on the display. Colonel Victor Hayes. Had heard stories about Victor Hayes. The man was a legend even among legends. During the water wars, he had single-handedly held a bridge against an entire army for 3 days. He had volunteered for experimental modifications that went far beyond what the other Titans received. Some said he was more machine than man now. Others said he was something else entirely. "Why is his pod still sealed?" asked. Minerva's voice came from speakers in the ceiling. Colonel Hayes left specific instructions. He is only to be awakened as a last resort. His modifications are extensive, and his psychological profile suggests that he may be difficult to control. Kate raised an eyebrow. Difficult to control, what does that mean? It means he is dangerous, Minerva replied, even by Titan standards. Looked at the sealed pod for a long moment, then turned away. Show us what happened. Show us why we were awakened. Minerva activated the displays and began to play recordings. The Titans watched in silence as 800 years of history unfolded before their eyes. They saw humanity spread across the stars. They saw the golden age of peace and exploration. They saw first contact with alien species and the treaties that followed. Then they saw the recordings showed the invasion in brutal detail. Cities burning, ships exploding, soldiers dying by the millions. The Titans watched their descendants fight and fall against an enemy that seemed endless. They watched 16 colonies wiped from existence. They watched Earth's last defenders make their final stand. And they watched Danny die. When the recordings ended, the chamber was silent, was the first to speak. His voice was quiet and cold. How many of them are there? The Dominion controls approximately 300 star systems, Minerva answered. Their military forces number in the trillions. They have occupied Earth for 17 days. Trillions, Christina repeated, and there are 46 of us. Looked at his fellow Titans. He saw anger in their eyes. He saw grief. But he also saw something else. He saw determination. These were soldiers who had been designed to face impossible odds. This was exactly the kind of situation they had been created for. 47 said firmly, "We are waking Victor." Kate frowned. Minerva said he was dangerous. "So are we," replied. "And right now we need every weapon we have. Minerva, begin the awakening sequence for Colonel Hayes." The computer hesitated for a fraction of a second then. The final pod began to open. The liquid inside drained away, and the man within began to stir. Victor Hayes opened his eyes, and they glowed with a faint blue light. He looked at the soldiers around him and smiled a smile that held no warmth. When he spoke, his voice sounded like it came from somewhere very far away. "How bad is it?" "Humanity is gone," told him. "The control Earth. We are all that is left." Victor stood up slowly. He was tall and thin and moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. His eyes swept across the chamber, taking in every detail in a single glance. The other Titans watched him carefully. They had heard the stories. They knew what he was capable of. "Then we have work to do," Victor said. "Show me what we are dealing with." He walked to the main display and began studying the information with a focus that was almost frightening. His modified mind processed data faster than the computer could provide it. Within minutes, he understood the enemy better than they understood themselves. When he finally turned around, his eyes were still glowing, but there was something new in them. Something that looked almost like excitement. "They think they have won," he said. "They think humanity is finished. They have no idea what is coming for them. Had expected Earth to be easy. They had killed the soldiers and burned the cities and crushed the resistance. Now all that remained was to occupy the planet and strip it of resources. That was what they had done to every other world they conquered. Earth would be no different. Or so they believed." High Commander had established his command center in the ruins of New York City. He had chosen the skeleton of what had once been humanity's tallest building as his headquarters. He wanted the survivors to see it every day. He wanted them to remember that their greatest achievements now belonged to the On the 18th day of the occupation, a patrol of 50 soldiers went missing in the Colorado wasteland. They had been searching for hidden human survivors when their communications suddenly went silent. Sent scouts to find them. The scouts found nothing. No bodies, no weapons, no tracks. The 50 soldiers had simply vanished. Told himself it was equipment failure. Humans were primitive creatures. They could not have destroyed an entire patrol without leaving evidence. 3 days later, a supply depot in what had once been Europe exploded with enough force to be seen from space. 3,000 soldiers died in an instant. Weapons and ammunition worth more than most planets were gone. When investigators arrived, they found only ash and twisted metal. The attacks continued. Every few days, something terrible would happen to forces somewhere on Earth. Patrols would disappear. Bases would burn. Officers would be found dead in their quarters, killed by weapons that left no trace. The occupiers started to become afraid. The common soldiers began to whisper about demons. They said the spirits of dead humans had returned to seek revenge. They called the attackers the Deathless Ones. Some refused to go on patrol. Others begged to be transferred off-world. Fear spread through the occupation force like a disease. Grant stood on a ridge overlooking the ruins of Denver and watched descend through the gray sky. His enhanced eyes could count individual soldiers from miles away. He could see their formations and identify their weapons. He knew exactly how many enemies stood between him and victory. Kate appeared beside him without making a sound. Her stealth modifications made her nearly invisible even to other Titans. She had been intercepting enemy communications for weeks, and the information she gathered was invaluable. "They are getting scared," she reported. "Their transmissions are full of fear. They think we are ghosts. Some of them think we are the spirits of the humans they killed come back from the dead." Allowed himself a small smile. "Good, fear is a weapon, let them be afraid." The Titans had been operating for 6 weeks. They struck targets of opportunity and vanished before they could respond. They destroyed fuel depots and communication arrays. They assassinated officers and sabotaged equipment. They moved through the night like shadows and left only death behind them. They had also freed over 2,000 human survivors from a labor camp in South America. The prisoners had been shocked to see soldiers who moved faster than eyes could follow and struck harder than any weapon they had ever seen. The Titans had told them to hide and wait. Help was coming. But freeing prisoners and destroying supplies was not enough to win a war. The Still controlled the skis. Their ships could bombard any position on Earth within minutes. Their flagship hung in orbit like a metal moon, watching everything that happened below. As long as that ship remained, the Titans could only fight in the shadows. Victor Hayes understood this better than anyone. He spent hours each day studying the enemy. His modified brain processed information faster than any computer, and his glowing eyes saw patterns that others missed. He had formed a plan, but it was a plan that bordered on madness. The other Titans gathered in the underground base to hear what he had to say. They sat in a rough circle around a holographic display that showed Earth and the ships in orbit around it. Victor stood at the center, and his presence filled the room like a physical force. "We have hurt them," he began. "We have made them afraid, but fear alone will not win this war. They have trillions of soldiers and hundreds of star systems. They can absorb our attacks forever. We need to do something that will break them completely." Leaned forward. "What do you have in mind?" Victor touched a control, and the display changed to show the flagship in detail. It was enormous. Nearly 3 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that could level a city in seconds. It was the symbol of power and the heart of their occupation. "This is the eternal conquest," Victor said. "High Commander commands the entire occupation from this vessel. If we destroy it, we remove their leadership and their symbol in one strike. The occupation will collapse." Christina Mercer shook her head slowly. "That ship is in orbit. We have no way to reach it. We have no ships. We have no weapons capable of damaging something that size." Victor smiled, and there was something unsettling in his expression. Dr. Vance knew that one day we might need to fight an enemy with superior technology. She prepared for that possibility. He touched another control, and the holographic display changed again. This time it showed schematics for something the Titans had never seen before. It looked like armor, but more advanced than anything they had ever worn. "These are the Icarus suits," Victor explained. "Personal combat exoskeletons capable of atmospheric and space operations. They are powered by miniaturized fusion reactors and armed with weapons designed to penetrate starship armor. Dr. Vance built 47 of them, one for each of us." Studied the schematics with growing understanding. "You want us to fly up to that ship and take it out ourselves?" "I want us to fly up to that ship and kill everyone on board," Victor corrected. "I want them to know that no matter where they hide, we can reach them. I want them to understand that humanity does not die quietly." The room was silent as the Titans considered the plan. It was dangerous beyond anything they had ever attempted. Many of them would die, but they had been created for moments like this. They had been designed to do the impossible. Was the first to speak. His voice was steady and his eyes were hard. "When do we start training?" Victor's smile grew wider. "Immediately. We have 3 weeks to prepare. Then we show what humans are really capable of." Flagship Eternal Conquest hung in orbit above Earth like a metal god looking down on its conquered subjects. High Commander stood on the observation deck and watched the planet below. His compound eyes reflected the lights of burning cities, and his 4 arms were clasped behind his back. The ghost attacks had gotten worse. His forces were losing soldiers every day to enemies they could not see or understand. His officers were afraid, and his superiors in the Dominion were asking questions he could not answer. Had conquered 17 human worlds, but this one planet was becoming a nightmare. His second-in-command, Al, stood nearby looking at reports on a data screen. The younger officer was nervous and could smell his fear. It disgusted him. "High Commander," Al said carefully, "perhaps we should request reinforcements from the Dominion. Whatever is attacking us seems to be more than ordinary human survivors." Turned on him with anger in his eyes. "We do not need reinforcements. We conquered this entire species with one fleet. I will not beg for help against scattered survivors and lucky strikes." Before Al could respond, the alarms began to wail. Red lights flashed throughout the command center, and officers scrambled to their stations. Something was happening that they had not expected. "Reports demanded." A sensor officer stared at his screen with disbelief. "Unknown contacts approaching from the planet's surface. Small objects moving at extreme velocity. We are attempting to track them, but they are too small for our targeting systems." Moved to the main display and watched as 47 points of light rose from Earth's atmosphere. They were climbing fast, faster than anything that had ever seen a human make. They were heading straight for his fleet. Deep inside his chest, something cold began to grow. It was a feeling he had not experienced in a very long time. Fear. The Titans launched from a hidden facility in the mountains with the rising sun at their backs. The Icarus suits wrapped around their bodies like second skin. They were sleek and black and hummed with power. Each suit contained enough weapons to destroy a small army and enough fuel to reach the stars. Grant led the formation. His enhanced senses were linked to the suit systems, and he could feel everything around him. He could see the ships ahead. He could track his fellow Titans behind him. He could hear their breathing and their heartbeats through the communication system. "Remember the plan," he said as they climbed through the thinning atmosphere. "'S team takes out the engines. Kate's team handles the point defense guns. Everyone else follows me to the command deck. We end this today." They opened fire when the Titans entered weapons range. The sky around them filled with plasma bolts and kinetic rounds. The space between Earth and the flagship became a storm of deadly energy. But the Titans were not easy targets. Their suits moved with impossible agility, and their enhanced reflexes let them dodge attacks that should have been unavoidable. They twisted and rolled and spiraled through the barrage like dancers in a deadly ballet. 3 Titans were hit in the first minute. Their suits exploded and their bodies were scattered across the void. Felt each death like a knife in his heart, but he did not slow down. He could not. There was no time for grief. 44 Titans reached the flagship, and his demolitions team hit the engine section first. Their suits' weapons cut through the armor like it was paper. Inside the ship, they moved with brutal efficiency. Soldiers tried to stop them, but they were no match for the enhanced humans. Placed charges at critical points while his team held off waves of defenders. 2 more Titans fell in the engine room. Their names were Samuel and Diana. They had been friends before they ever joined the program. They died within seconds of each other. Kate's marksmen took positions along the hull of the ship. Their suits' targeting systems could identify threats before they even appeared. Kate herself killed 37 gunners in the first 2 minutes. One by one, the point defense batteries went silent. Led the main assault through an airlock that Christina had hacked open. The corridors of the flagship were tall and wide to accommodate their alien bodies. The Titans moved through them like wolves through a forest. Every corner became a killing ground. Every intersection became a grave. They fought back with desperate courage. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, and they would not surrender their flagship to a handful of humans. But courage was not enough. The Titans were faster and stronger and harder to kill than anything they had ever faced. Victor Hayes moved ahead of everyone else. His modified body shrugged off wounds that would have killed a normal human. His glowing eyes tracked enemies before they could even raise their weapons. He was heading for the command deck, and nothing in the universe was going to stop him. Watched the reports come in with growing horror. His soldiers were dying by the hundreds. The things attacking his ship were not ordinary humans. They were something else entirely, something that should not exist. He drew his sidearm and pointed it at the door. Around him, his bridge crew did the same. They would make their last stand here in the heart of their power. They would die like warriors. The door exploded inward, and Victor Hayes stepped through the smoke. His armor was and burned, but his eyes still glowed with cold fury. In his hands, he held weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Fired, but Victor was already moving. The plasma bolt missed by centimeters. Before the High Commander could fire again, Victor was in front of him. "You came to Earth looking for an easy conquest," Victor said. His voice was calm and quiet. "You found something else." Tried to speak, but Victor's weapon was already at his throat. The High Commander of the occupation died before he could say a single word. Outside the ship, charges detonated. The engine section exploded and the eternal conquest began to break apart. Alarms screamed throughout the dying vessel. Bulkheads collapsed and atmosphere vented into space. Gave the order to evacuate. The surviving Titans blasted through the hull and flew away from the flagship as it tore itself apart. They watched from a safe distance as the symbol of power exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The flash was visible from the surface of Earth. Humans who had been hiding in ruins and bunkers looked up at the sky and saw the explosion. They did not know what it meant, but they felt something stir in their hearts, something they had not felt in a long time. Hope. 31 Titans survived the assault. 16 had given their lives to destroy the enemy flagship, recorded each of their names in his memory so he would never forget. They had died so that humanity could live. As the Titans flew back toward Earth, Victor Hayes looked at the burning wreckage they had left behind. His glowing eyes reflected the flames, and his modified face showed something that might have been satisfaction. "This is just the beginning," he said. The destruction of the eternal conquest sent shockwaves through the Dominion. Their greatest warship had been destroyed. Their most decorated commander had been killed. Over 50,000 soldiers had died in a single night, and it had all been done by a handful of humans who should have been extinct. The news spread across 300 star systems, and everywhere it went it carried the same message. Humanity was not dead. Something had survived, something dangerous. On Earth, the occupation began to collapse. Without to command them, the forces fell into chaos. Some units tried to retreat to there only to find them destroyed by sabotage. Others surrendered to the Titans, begging for mercy from the deathless ones they had heard so much about. A few tried to fight, but they were quickly overwhelmed. Within 3 months, every soldier on Earth was dead or captured. The planet was free for the first time since the invasion began. But Grant knew that liberation was only the first step. The Dominion still controlled 300 star systems. They still had trillions of soldiers. They would return with overwhelming force, and they would not make the same mistakes again, unless humanity struck first. The Titans spent the next 6 months rebuilding. They emerged from the shadows and revealed themselves to the human survivors who had hidden throughout the occupation. Over 2 million people came out of bunkers and caves and ruins. They had survived the worst, and now they looked to the Titans for guidance. Victor Hayes addressed them from the rebuilt command center. His voice was broadcast to every corner of the planet. Behind him, the 30 surviving Titans stood in a row. Their bodies were from battle, but their eyes were bright with purpose. "They made a mistake," Victor said. "They thought that by killing the last of us they would end human resistance forever. Instead, they activated a that was designed to protect our species. They woke soldiers who were created to fight impossible wars. They woke us." He paused and let his glowing eyes sweep across the faces of the survivors watching him. He saw fear in some of them. He saw hope in others. He saw something that might be the beginning of courage. "We are going to rebuild this world. We are going to rearm and retrain. We are going to create a military force unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. And then we are going to take the war to the... We will free our colonies. We will liberate their slave worlds. We will make them understand that humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not submit. Humanity does not die." Stepped forward to address the crowd directly. "They have an empire of 300 systems. They have trillions of soldiers. They have never lost a war." He paused, and his voice grew harder. "They have never faced us at full strength. They have never seen what humanity can do when our survival is at stake. The Titan program was designed to be our last line of defense. Now it will become our first line of attack." In the months that followed, Earth transformed. Factories that had been destroyed were rebuilt using designs that Dr. Vance had left behind. The technology was centuries ahead of anything they possessed. It had been created for exactly this moment. The Titans trained thousands of new soldiers. They identified men and women who had the potential to become something more. Not everyone could undergo the full Titan modifications, but there were other enhancements that could be given. Soon humanity had an army of enhanced warriors ready to fight. Christina Mercer led a team that studied captured technology. She reverse-engineered their weapons and shields and engines. She combined alien technology with human designs to create something entirely new. Weapons that were more powerful than anything either species had built alone. Kate built an intelligence network that stretched across the stars. She made contact with resistance movements on the occupied human colonies. She gathered information about fleet movements and military installations. She knew more about the enemy than they knew about themselves. Oversaw the construction of a new fleet. The ships were smaller than warships, but they were faster and more maneuverable. They were designed for the kind of warfare that the Titans had perfected. Hit hard, move fast, never let the enemy know where you will strike next. 1 year after the liberation of Earth, the Human Liberation Fleet launched its first offensive. 50 ships carrying 10,000 enhanced soldiers jumped into the system of. The colony there had been one of the first to fall during the invasion. 3 million humans had been enslaved in its mines and factories. The garrison was caught completely off guard. They had expected years of peace after their victory over humanity. They had not expected the dead to rise. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the garrison was destroyed and the human slaves were free. The Liberation Fleet lost only 2 ships and a few hundred soldiers. They lost everything. Grant stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the liberated colony through the former slaves were emerging from their prisons and looking up at the ships that had saved them. Some of them were crying. Others were cheering. All of them wore expressions of disbelief. Kate stepped up beside him. The High Command is panicking. They are calling for emergency reinforcements from across the Dominion. They do not understand what is happening. Let them panic, replied. Let them send reinforcements. Every ship they move is a ship somewhere else becomes vulnerable. We will strike where they are weak. We will keep them off balance. We will never let them rest. Victor Hayes was already planning the next offensive. His glowing eyes stared at star maps and fleet positions. His modified brain calculated probabilities and strategies faster than any computer. He had been created to win impossible wars. Now he was finally doing what he was made for. In the end, they would learn the lesson that so many conquerors before them had failed to understand. Humanity could be beaten down and burned and left for dead, but it could never be truly destroyed. There would always be survivors. There would always be resistance. There would always be those who refused to accept defeat. And sometimes there would be sleepers waiting in the dark, soldiers designed for the worst, warriors created for the end of everything. Danny had been the last human to fall in the war for Earth. His death had triggered the awakening of the Titans. His sacrifice had saved his species. Somewhere in the ruins of that old bunker in Colorado, his bones still rested in the soil he had died to protect. Made sure that every new soldier learned his name. Every ship in the Liberation Fleet carried his image. Every battle began with a moment of silence for the young man who had faced an army alone. Because Danny had taught them the most important lesson of all. Hope is never truly lost, not as long as one person remains willing to fight, not as long as one heart keeps beating against the darkness. And when that last heart finally stops, there will always be others ready to take up the cause, to rise from the ashes, to carry the fire forward. That is what it means to be human. That is why we will never be defeated.